Greetings, one and all. You are tuned in once again to the Cosmic Roots Show. This is your brother Siayome, a.k.a. Cosmic All Mystic and Abon Krim. And we are here for another show again. And the last one was part 2 of What is Spiritual Awakening. Yes, I trust you're all well as life is. And I'm just trying to sort out something here as I get myself organized. Now, so let me just play another tune for y'all because I think I feel to play some music here. And we'll drop it like this. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. So greetings one and all. Yes, brother souls, soul brothers and sisters, yeah. Greetings this evening, Tuesday, rainy day, moist, wet up, little chilly. You want to be inside, indoors, and keep yourself warm. Yeah, well, It is another session this evening of the Cosmic Roots Show. Yes, for those who may have just tuned in, greetings to you all. And for those who is new to the show, you know, you can also tune in via www.blessradio.org, via the internet or on FM or on the TuneIn app. And also right now on the live YouTube stream going on here right now, right live. If you tune into YouTube, Bless Radio 1. So yes, greetings, y'all, one and all. And yes, I was talking last strong about, you know, what is spiritual awakening, you know, as in, you know, asking these questions as cause there is a lot of pseudo or a lot of misunderstanding a lot about this thing as well. You know, many things can become you know, yeah, just looking at the message here. Yeah, you see, there's a deeper reality going on here about it, and a lot of things get commercialized, and a lot of things get taken out of its real. People miss the actual principle of a thing, and a lot of things can get taken out of context, out of joint, through the opinions and misperceptions people have of this spiritual awakening. And I feel it's a very important thing to, you know, dive into, because knowing who you are is very important for yourself. A lot of information gathering can leave one having a lot of information, but not necessarily knowing any of it in depth and what specifically the information they've been gathering, the meaning it has to their own self, you know, specifically. You know, there's a lot of diversity in communication, a lot of diversity in the ways things are perceived. And we can gather a lot of information and kind of get on this treadmill, like, you know, you just keep thinking you got to gather more and more and more information because, you know, information is changing so rapidly. Something you think you understand turns out to actually change, you know, expands beyond what your previous comprehension of it may have been. And you may feel you're on this constant, you know, pull to gather more information. And in this way, one could end up getting kind of missing the relevance that the information that they're gathering should be having in the meaning it holds for them specifically. You know what I'm saying? Some people change their points of view with the wind because it's information that is not necessarily being asked in the why and the what and the how to the relevance of what this information has to me, you know, to their own self, to help them understand who they are. Because this is what it's really all is about, for you to know who you truly are. So you can be free and be who you truly are. There's a lot of suppressed energy based upon, you know, the ego construct, the society, the conditioning that has suppressed or limited the ability for individuals to really get in touch with who they really are on the deeper level of themselves. Certain emotions, pain, trauma has made people put up protections, you know, from from when it happened, whatever experience, to, you know, emotionally protect themselves from a pain that kind of puts up a wall and doesn't enable them, holds them back from really experiencing who they really are, you know, beyond that fear and those walls put up, to know who they are really to relate to themselves, because it's how you relate to who you are. You see what I mean? How you're in a reflection upon yourself in order to know who you really is, to be this authentic self or true, you know. And there's parts of ourselves we feel we can't express because conditioning has set up certain painful experiences that, you know, makes us hold on to an aspect of what we think is ourselves, but it's not really. It's a personality we've donned to cope, you know, with something we're repressing or suppressing in ourselves. And in this time, so much stuff is coming up to, you know, force folk to look deeper within themselves, you know, to get beyond a certain superficial knowledge, or depending upon knowledge that is, you know, coming from a kind of societal, intellectual, you know, how we perceive ourselves to be or how you think you should be, in order to match up with whatever is so-called acceptable. When beyond all of that, you know, and looking outside for the validation or, you know, your personal self-image being dependent upon an external societal construct, which is not enabling one to actually get in touch with who they truly are beneath the surface. You see what I'm saying? So, you know, spiritual awakening takes on a real big, and it's like more of a deeper questions to be asked, you know what I mean? For a deeper realization to come. You know, the why, the what, and the how, and the when, you see? In order to expand and gain greater comprehension, you see, beyond, and also to develop more emotional intelligence, to be able to discern between what you may be projecting from an unresolved inner trauma onto the scene of your experience, that could be another person or a situation, differently to what is emerging through your intuition, true developed intuition, you know, where there has been a growth and maturity in the emotional intelligence of oneself. You know, I talk from things from a perspective of different, what you could say, eclectic views, because, you know, I draw on diversity of knowledge, but I just don't deal with knowledge that's, you know, just to accumulate more information. There comes a point where that information that you're gathering must have a specific, like, how does this relate to you? You know what I'm saying? Specifically. You know, you can have people gather a lot of information and be in this belief that they have to keep gathering, you know, in order to feel that they're on point or up to date, but that information is, you could gather a whole heap of information, have a whole heap of information, but you don't have no inner depth. There's no inner depth understanding of any of it. And how does it apply to you? How does it relate to you knowing yourself more clearer and deeper and truer? You see? Because it's about how you are relating to yourself inwardly, you know? A lot of us relate to ourselves still based on external approval and validation and, you know, feeling things have to fit in, you got to make sense. I mean, even to everyone. Yeah. Where you're coming from may not necessarily make sense to everyone. And not everything that doesn't appear to make sense to one may not make sense to another. You see, even the word sense, we may think of something making sense in a, you know, when we're thinking of information in a logical, structured, linear way, you know, but then there is that which makes sense, but it may not appear to make sense from the logical linear perspective, you see? Because the knowledge of thyself is to what we're walking in as, you know, this idea of this personal self-image and this mind and this body. The true reality of ourselves goes much more deeper, you see, much more deeper. And, you know, even the idea of sense, a lot of us think about it as an intellectual mental process that has to follow along linear logical lines. Intuition doesn't follow through linear logical lines or through mental processing. I'm talking about genuine intuition. What is that? You know, the ability to receive, like, you know something without and beyond the limited dependency of acquiring external data. Okay? You know, beyond the cognitive, rational intellect, there is an ability to receive knowing without cognitive processes. You know, there's a precognitive level of intelligence that goes higher than the intellect, known as intuition. You know, to know something without even knowing how you know it. You know, meaning, how did you get to this awareness of what it is that you've come to know? And a lot of us, we've been conditioned to believe that you have to be taught by someone else, something outside of you. You know, you have to go to an institution and gather qualifications and certifications to be certified and qualified by someone else in a particular field of knowledge that you would say, you know, you would want to acquire, and that it's limited to only being able to be accessed from the outside, dependent upon this externalization. You know, there is a psychological certain psychological terms, like, you know, you can have to describe people, not as in a judgment, but just to kind of like see what you're dealing with. What I mean by this is that, you know, you can have people who are very object referral. You know, object referral is like they need to refer to something external to them, someone external to them, some external information, some external data. Objective, you know, being objective in how they're referring. They deal with that. You can say that's their reference point. You know, got to be objective. It's like being outside of the actual experience in a way, in order to gain information from that viewpoint, that reference point, objective, you know? So that can also be that which is separate from you, external to you, you know? And some people depend and rely upon that. And in the society that we live in, this seems to be the norm. That's the only way you can gain knowledge, you know? To access the ledge of knowing, you know? And when actually there is another, you have some people who are very self-referral. So they kind of go within, they refer more to themselves in how they ask questions, the why, the how, or the why, the what, and the how, in order to also access the answers that come through from themselves. You see what I'm saying? Without necessarily any external dependency on external input, you see? And that's a reality that exists, you see? But you see also, when we're dealing with objective referral, it can be you can be both, you know what I'm saying, as well. You can switch from both, you know, you can be self-referral and objectively referral. But the thing is, any information you gather essentially it's going to have to come to a point in what is this information? What does it mean to me specifically? You know, you can get generalized on information, but when you get specific, it has to become what is relative to you. What meaning does this have to me? Otherwise, the relationship you're having with information is just gathering stuff. You know what I mean? Without any deep in knowledge of any of it. You know, and because information is changing so rapidly, you can get caught up chasing information because you got to keep up to date with something that you may not even truly relate with. You know what I'm saying? Or relate to. So knowledge, why it's about self-knowledge. You see how you can say I got a lot of knowledge, but then you got self-knowledge. So why, you know, there's a distinction between that self-knowledge to acquiring knowledge, gathering information and so forth, more data, you know? So one can, you know, and then things you get limited in a sense of what's making sense to you from a certain perspective of how you're gathering information. You may come across something that doesn't make sense to you. And why is it so important for something to make sense to you? I think it's quite evident, isn't it? Because it's how you are to know yourself, how you are to understand yourself, how you're going to comprehend yourself, and how you're going to communicate with another who may understand themselves in a completely different way to you. You see, and what they may comprehend as themselves may not even be who they really are. But at the same time, you, as an individual, need to comprehend yourself and what relevance does the information you gather have to you specifically. Do you get what I'm saying? It's got to be, this is where it gets, in order to get to knowing thyself. How are you going to know thyself if the information you're gathering isn't, you're not being concerned on how relevant it is to you? What are you seeking? What are you seeking to gain through the information you gather? Why? Why do you want that info? You know what I mean? What does that information mean to you? And how will you relate to that information? How you would be able to use that and work with that information? You see what I'm saying? You know, these are the kind of questions that makes one have to go deeper or realize that it's deeper, you know? Knowledge is about something very much more deeper to access who you are on a deeper level, rather than the superficial surface knowledge you can have of yourself or other things, which leaves you kind of, you know, leaves you out on a limb, if you know, as that saying, as that impression is, out on a limb. You know, you're not balanced. There's something missing. There's a feeling of being separate from something that you need to connect with or feel connected with in order to realize more of who you are, to even nourish your emotional sense of inner security. You know, what's emotionally nourishing your sense of security? You know what I mean? How are you emotionally nourishing yourself, which makes you secure in yourself, more than depending upon the security to be coming from something outside. You know what I'm saying? You know, emotional security, the way we perceive ourselves, you know, everything pivots around that. Everything in our experience pivots around that. And how you perceive yourself is going to be more important than how others perceive you. But then some people think it's more important of how they're perceived by others than how they are, than the relationship they're really having with themselves. You know, who am I? You know, what am I? You know, are you just amalgamation of your conditioning, or are you tapping into what's beyond, what's deeper than that? You know, to get to then when we talk about getting in touch with your true self, you know, your true, you know, when they say authentic, some would interpret that to be, you know, you're transparent, you know, you're real, you know, you're you. Well, to know you, to be you, you first have to know you. And who is this, you know, you? And you notice that everything always points back to you. You know what I'm saying? Everything really always comes back to you. It's like all roads end up becoming a U-turn, you know, that leads back to you. You know what I'm saying? U-turn, turn back to you. All the roads seems to turn back to you. It's a U-turn, yeah? Because it is about you. A lot of us think it's about others and what others think and what others believe and what others are doing. And yeah, there's a part of that. There is a part of that. That obviously is, you know, you got to function, find a way of functioning within, but at the same time, more ultimately, it's about the relationship you have with you and who you truly is. You know what I'm saying? So I started what I'm saying in this way because, you know, as I said, information gathering, and what makes sense to one may not make sense to the other, and then someone may put down what someone else, what someone else may be trying to convey because it doesn't make sense to them, and then, you know, this is how, in a sense, you see the word sense, even this, you know, a consensus. This is how you get consensus thinking. You know, consensus. You know, it's like together. Well, if it doesn't make sense together with what is applicable to, you know, to something that you would say makes sense to you or another, you see how it has to come back to you. You see, this always, as I said, it's a U-turn, 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 U-turn. U-turn. All roads eventually become a U-turn, turns into a U-turn back towards yourself, to find yourself. To find yourself is to know yourself. To know yourself, why? So you can be what you truly is. You see what I'm saying? A lot of people are suppressing, you know, being who they are and not being who they are. So information. Information. Why are you gathering information? You want to be informed. But things eventually has to get specific. Yeah? Specific. How does this relate to you? And you may do your things differently in relation to somebody else. And this is where, you know, the diversity, you know what I mean? In different people's, you know, comprehension of things, many things, only but different things. But it all comes back to you. How do you understand yourself? How do you communicate with yourself? What's reflecting back to you to know who you are? I know I'm repeating myself. I'm repeating myself quite a bit here. But you see, as I said, what may make sense to you may not make sense to someone else. And then we can go into like what this thing about sense. We look at sense maybe in some logical way, you know what I mean? And say you're more intuitive and able to gather information beyond the limitations of having to depend upon external data or things to logically link up in a certain linear way, in the way you think. Not everybody's thinking process even operates in the same way. You know, this is a thing. You know what I'm saying? People presume that everybody's thinking process operates in the same way as theirs. You know, or that you cannot think, your thinking process cannot operate in a different way and still come to the same realization that somebody else came to through a different way of how they process information. You see? So you see how it's important to get in touch with, well, how does the information, how is it relative to me? You know, specifically, what does this mean? What do I feel about this thing here? Rather than, well, other people this, other people that, you know, which is cool. You get the diversity of, you know, views, but it all comes back to you. So just for a sec, I'll go into this term sense, you know, nonsense and making sense. You know, what is sense? You know what I'm saying? What does actually sense mean? You know, something doesn't make sense to someone, they may think it's mumbo jumbo. And you know that term mumbo jumbo, I've heard that being said to me before, and I've heard people use it, and I've grown up and you hear this, mumbo jumbo. And, you know, it's like, it can appear like, you know, you see some people are very intellectually, they're processing in the way they think. And it's even a way of even undermining other people's minds. If you're going to just quickly say, well, that sounds like a load of mumbo jumbo to me, because it's not making any sense. You know, and so that means it's nonsense. Yeah, nonsensical, okay, to them. And they may presume to others who, you know, but that's not necessarily so. Here we go again with this thing about, you know, mumbo jumbo. I remember, but this is some time ago, man, many decades, where the name, that term mumbo jumbo actually came from an actual real or individual, you know, that existed named Mama Jamba. Mama Jamba. And you know how terms we use and get disempowered or discredited by other minds who may not make sense of something, and because of some limitations or whatever, they want to discredit it. Okay, so then, you know, others who don't want to be perceived as being stupid or don't have enough confidence in their own thought process, you know, and how they come to understand themselves for themselves, how they process information in order to gather what's relevant and something specific in the meaning and how it helps them relate to themselves in a more holistic way, or in a more authentic way, more true way, so they can be true to themselves, even if it's not making sense to somebody else. You see how this, you know what I'm saying? Because there's this diversity, and some people think that diversity is can perceive diversity as being negative or threatening. But I see diversity as ways of revealing the value of each one of our individuality and uniqueness, and how to express that individual uniqueness we all carry within us. You see what I'm saying? And what can happen to try to suppress that, you know? So, yeah, Mama Jamba is where you get the term mumbo jumbo from, you know? Europeans turned that into, you see, and here's the thing, when you're dealing with things that don't make sense to some folk, you know, why information is quite broad and how you process information is quite important, and why, you know, these questions to get deeper into anything that you could be exploring, for example, right? It is to ask the question why, what, and how. You know what I'm saying? To be able to go deeper into something that may not seem to make sense at first, to maybe realize that maybe you're missing something in just a perception, the way you may be perceiving it. That same thing that we may even take as granted, you know, as knowing, oh, we know this. For example, I use the term unity. We use various words a lot. that is very we're with a lot of conviction, which pivots where our beliefs and philosophies, you know what I'm saying, or knowledge of ourselves, are related to words like unity, words like unity, freedom, liberty. We use these words, but it's like, what's the specifics? What does this really mean to you? What does this specifically mean to me? Because we can run on words and have a meaning or interpretation of it that really doesn't have any real meaning for you. Like, for example, unity. We would think, well, that's something that's obvious. We want to unite. To unite. And if you look at the word unity, we want to unite. A lot of people want to unite. We talk about unity, uniting. But the thing is with unity, it's like we usually want to unite against something. You see what I'm saying? We need to get together and unite against a looming threat. And if we're not united, then that which we see or perceive as a looming threat may take us under. You know what I mean? So we need to unite. So we use these words, unite. But it's usually uniting against something. Let's show our solidarity that we are united against this or against that. And it's a bit of an oxymoron when you look at the word unite. Because it actually comes from the word unit. Like, what's the meaning? Meaning is about the concept of what, like the word you're using to think with. The language we speak with is what we use to think with, to be cognitive with. And language is limited. Language is limited to explain things that go beyond the tactile senses, you know what I mean? The limited mental processing and intellect, you know what I'm saying? And it's like if you're not able to access another level of intelligence, even the whole idea of thinking that being intellectual or relating to intellect as being intelligence, when being intellectual doesn't really mean you're intelligent. It means you've gathered a lot of information and can maybe regurgitate it, but you may not have any deep, focused knowledge on any of that information in how it can help you and what meaning, what's the relevant, what specific meaning can that, have for you? What does it mean to you? You know what I'm saying? And that makes you quite intellectual, but there's not necessarily any intelligence. And intelligence also comes in a form of emotional intelligence. It's not always in a form of intellect, So, as I'm saying about, like, for example, the word unity, and it comes from the word unit. Yet we use words like unity to unite against something. So you see there's an oxymoron going on because you're uniting against. Hang on a minute, against, But wait a minute, unity, isn't unity to be whole? And then uniting with what? Or uniting for what? Do we even think and question, what's the specific meaning here in how we're using the word? That has so much energy to it. And so much so-called definition we put to it. But what does it specifically mean to you? Unit can be seen as a noun. Unite comes from the word unit, man. Unity is the root. The root of unity comes from unit. Union. Right? So what is that? How it can be defined, if you go to the etymologicalness of it, and why is that important? Well, man, wouldn't it be important to have a deeper understanding of the word you're actually using to define whatever, to propel your actions with, you know? Information you're gathering, how does that feel to, what is its relevantness to myself? A lot of people think certain things, they're not interested in the deeper questions about their life and themselves. You know, they're not necessarily interested with the questions of why and how and what of themselves. You see, you know, it's okay. Let's stay on the surface and think we comprehend things, although you know what we're saying, when maybe you really don't. How we're using it, or don't even see how we're using something. And if you had a better comprehension of how you're using it, you could use it more efficiently. You see what I'm saying? Word, sound, power. You know, energy. But we're dealing with vibration before you even get the sound to even hear a word. So everything comes back to this vibration. To how you feel within. And information is also vibration. And information is also energy. So how we relate to information also is how we're relating to ourselves. But you may not be asking the questions like why, what, and how, if anything, to get deeper, you know, on the information you may be, you know, into. You know, an individual thing, a unit means an individual thing or person regarded as single and complete. You hear that? Unit actually comes to first the beginning with an individual unit, yeah, or a thing or person, an individual thing or person regarded as single and complete, yeah, but which can also form an individual component of a larger or more complex whole, yeah. So that's when individuals come together, you make a group. But think what I'm saying here. Think more deeply what I'm saying here. Just on this one word, unit, unity, union, unit. I'm going to the root, like the seed of how a word would grow, to be able to understand the concept behind it, to say, oh, I know the meaning of it. You know what I'm saying? And to go beyond that meaning that can also become limited, you know, to the energy, the consciousness energy, vibration, you see, of that word, behind that word, to actually feel into its true meaning, if we say. So I'm saying unit, and a lot of people don't think of unity as relating to the word unit, or see that unity actually means an individual, right? An individual thing or person regarded as single and complete. So you're single as an individual and also complete. A unit. You hear that? You got people that feel that they're not complete until they're with someone else. So we usually have this idea of unity by uniting with something else outside of ourselves. I got to unite with this or that. And then there's a why behind it. Why are you uniting with this or that? You know, people may not even ask the why, you know. But as I said, usually people talk about unity in the way, within the energy of uniting against something. When the word unity comes from the word unit, which means that you're single and complete. You're an individualized, single, and complete existence, unit, and how you individualized, complete individual units can come together to form a greater or a larger, more complex whole. Now, some people look in the whole, the group, they build their sense of identity around that. So if the group was to disperse, or they were ejected out the group, they may have a identity crisis because they're defining themselves around the group, when we look for identity. I mean, okay, what I'm saying may be like, what? But think about it. We use words like unity. We must unite. We have to unite, We have to come together, And what does it actually mean? Because usually we're using it not from the perspective of an awareness, firstly, of what that mean to as an individual. How does that specifically mean to me, unit? What does the word unity mean to me? And as I've just said, that the word itself breaks down to as a noun to mean an individual thing or person regarded as single and complete within itself, but also can come together to form an individual, form a larger or a more complex group. Yeah? Each of us are individual components that is whole and complete within itself. This would be okay, or being aware of unity. But then we could say that you don't feel complete unless you're united with someone else or some group or something else. And usually the idea of unity is based upon uniting against something that's perceived as a threat. And therefore, through the unity, we are stronger, it appears, to be able to ward off the threat or what's perceived as such. So are we really dealing with unity when we're talking about unity when we're just using it in the way that we usually use it without thinking deeper, like, what does this information specifically hold for me? What meaning does this have? You see? So when I'm talking about spiritual awakening, you can see how this is like, it's very pertaining to oneself. You see? So, and each unit, each complete unified whole has a specific relationship to the whole, to the group, to something that is larger, more complex to itself. But actually, it contains the whole also within itself. But we think we're not whole until we're with a group or we think we're with somebody else. You see how this whole thing about unity, let's unite. And if we have a misunderstanding about what unity even means, and it's got an energy about behind to unite against something, then there's separation. There's separation in the whole idea of where you may be coming from and how you perceive the word unity to mean. Yet we're using these words as like, yeah, man, our unity, we get what it means. Yeah, we must unite. But yet people don't feel united or complete in their own selves. You see what I'm saying? And here, see, this is what self-knowledge is about. It's about yourself. Get to know who you are, what you are. Beyond the superficial surface comprehension you believe you have of yourself or something or someone or, you know what I'm saying? You see? So we have that, as I said, about, look at unity. I'm sure you're going to be thinking about unity in a bit different way now. You see? And people think that they're separate if they're an individual. When it's like, and look at the word individual. Individual actually is a composite word of two words, which one of the word is indivisible, which means inseparable. And the other composite word is jewel. Jewel. Hello? So you're an indivisible duality as an individual, which then what ties into the word unit? An individual thing or person that is single and complete. A complete whole unit within itself. And can also form compounds that of a larger whole. Individual groups are made up of individuals, man. Your body is made up of individual cells. But each individual cell is whole and complete within itself, which is where all the other individualized cells actually came out from the so-called division, which became a multiplication of a single cell, which can produce another cell whole and complete as its own self, able to do everything it can do. You see what I'm saying? And everything is made up of cells. So a cell is whole and complete within itself and can also make a group of cells. Cells, selves, selves, cells and selves, you know, that then becomes part of a larger and complex body, a larger complex whole. From a simplicity, you get complexity. And within the complexity, you have simplicity. You see? So now what I'm saying here, I'll go back to the word sense. That don't make sense, or that may seem like gobbledygook or mumbo jumbo. You hear these terms, mumbo jumbo. And I said that mumbo jumbo actually comes from a female named Mama Jamba. I'm going to do some research on that. But check this thing. When we deal with the elders, our mama, you know, the elders, we would say, who are more elder in wisdom, elder in life. Because just because you are chronologically older doesn't mean that you are any wiser than a 14-year-old. You know what I'm saying? You may, you know, because it's not this external thing we're talking about, how much gray hair you got on your face or head that determines how wise you are, or to say you're an elder in the term elder, right? So when I'm referring to mama, we can also say, like, you know, our mama, our grandmama used to tell us certain things. She used to say certain things, had certain sayings she'd use. And she'd use those sayings, and to us on the surface level, it don't make no sense. It's like, it's nonsense. Yeah, it's nonsensical to the level of awareness and how you're perceiving what is being said in yourself. It doesn't make no sense. And this is how, you know, things can be put down by those who would say it's nonsensical. This is nonsensical. You know, something they don't comprehend, and put down that knowledge to say stupidness. But usually in nonsensical things at the surface level, there's a lot of, beneath the surface level, there's a lot of wisdom in there. You say that your mama actually says there's a lot of wisdom. Later on, you find out there was a lot of wisdom in what your mama said, or someone who would be like an elder, like a mama. You know what I'm saying? And because them stuff is quite profound, them little sayings. You know, like you can't plant corn you can't plant peas forget corn. That may seem nonsensical at a level of comprehension if you're not contemplating something that you just heard. Like that. You can't plant peas to get corn. What's that got to do with something you feel it has nothing to relate to? You see what I'm saying? That don't make sense. And you can break down, may even be very intellectual to kind of really prove how it don't make sense from an intellectual level. But then there's something you could be missing on the esoteric level. And yeah, there's a lot of things that you can say don't make sense, that a lot of people grab on, they grab onto that stuff. And they use, and they could be walking with stuff that they themselves don't even get. It doesn't make no sense to them, but they're not looking for the specific. What does this information specifically have for me? How does it assist me to know myself more clearly, more truly, more authentically, so I can be real to myself, not to someone else's expectation or validation, dependency. You see what I'm saying? In order to operate within those parameters. I mean, that just stuff is busting out. Now, this is when we talk about the Aquarian age. Look, come to the word freedom and liberation. Freedom to be able to expand one's individuated consciousness. Aquarius also represents the individuated unconscious as well as the individuated consciousness of the individual. So there's things that deeper knowledge in the unconscious that we may not be consciously aware of. And Aquarius is about the freedom to be able to, say, fracture, liberate oneself from limited concepts or limited structures of thinking or perceptions that is not enabling one to, that's limiting one to go, to be able to get into the broader, to realize what, to become conscious of the unconscious, basically. Yeah? You know, what was limiting you, a certain structure of perception, a certain structure of the way your consciousness had been molded, can be limiting you in becoming conscious of what you have been unconscious of based upon your deeper and true nature. So you get freedom. So we want to be free. Free is to be liberated, free from that which is not enabling you to be all you can be or more of who you really are. You understand what I'm saying? Hope you do. I trust you do. So, you know, things that some elders can say to us and so forth. Some folks speak in parables. Certain truth is preserved in parabolic language. You know, certain truths, certain information is also preserved in symbolic stories, in a symbolic format, to store the hidden message within the story. You see what I'm saying? So just because something may not make surface sense to someone doesn't mean that there's nothing in there. So this is only going to be perceived when you begin to ask questions like why, you know, what and how. You know what I'm saying? And when. And how does this information, how relevant is this information is to myself specifically? Or what specific meaning does this information have so I can get clear on the point that's being made? You get me? And because communication is a form of connection, how communication can make people not feel connected because there's something being missed in translation. Something's lost in translation. So we use terms like mumbo jumbo when something doesn't seem to make sense to us, or sense to, or if something you're saying doesn't seem to make sense to somebody else. You know, who can be considered as very intelligent, you know, or clever or smart. But, you know, sometimes, you know, even smart folk gets duped, you know, get stumped for a moment. And like, hang on a second, that don't make no sense. But on deeper investigation, they begin to maybe, you know, begin to see something more than what they saw before, you know, through the limited perspective. So even when you look at the word sense then, so if something doesn't make sense, but what is sense? For something to make sense, well, what is sense? Sense as a noun, or plural being senses, yeah, is a faculty by which the body perceives an external stimulus. One of the faculties of sight, another faculties of smell, hearing, taste, and touch. Yeah, these are tactile senses. These are the 5 senses they talk about that we all possess. That bear, you know, to kind of, you know, so you're dealing with these senses. Senses are actually faculties, right? And it's synonymous, I should say, with sensory faculties when using the word sense, feeling sensations when you're using the term sense, perception, you see, you know, sight, hearing, touch, taste, smell, as the 5 physical senses. But we got also 6th sense. We got even higher senses than just the tactile 5 senses. So think how now the word sense is kind of more broader than just the way it could be used in communication if something is not cognitive to somebody else to make sense to them. You see? And how we use the word sense to limit it as if to say it's something cognitive only in the sense of intellect and linear thinking processes, when actually sense goes beyond that. We're dealing with a faculty and a sensory organs, yeah, which are basically what our body uses to perceive, yeah, external stimuli. Okay? And one of those faculties, as I said, is one of those five senses. But then we got what you call the sixth sense. And people usually term that to be meaning the third eye. You know, dealing with the endocrine system as one of the glandular systems in the, one of the glands within the endocrine glandular system, you know, the pineal, the pituitary gland, you know. Now, these are glandular. This is a glandular system. The endocrine. Endocrine means within. Look at that. It's your inner, not the outer tactile, not just about the outer tactile faculties, these organs of perception, known as the five tactile senses that we use and depend and rely upon mainly. A lot of people, that's all they're relying upon. So there's a limitation to those senses. But then there are senses that are beyond the five senses. The sixth sense, for example. People usually relate that to the third eye, the pituitary and pineal gland. You see? And then you got your inner senses. They talk about inner higher senses. And remember now, I'm going into the word senses, which is taking it beyond this whole idea of, well, man, logical sense. Logical. You got stuff that may not make logical sense to the logical linear thinking process, but is very logical, you know, even though it's not making sense to the linear thinking process, but it's still moving upon illogical lines through an irrational, from an irrational, what doesn't make rational reasoning sense to the rational reasoning mind may make still logical sense to an on the irrational level, because it goes beyond what you're limited to perceive. How something, the why and the how, or the why and the what and the how of something. Why did this happen? What is actually happening? How did this actually happen? Why, is this existing? How, what is the purpose behind it? How does this or that, you see what I'm saying? Operate, function. How does it serve me? How does it support me? You see, these are just these questions. Why, what, how, makes you dive deeper into any information beyond the superficial surface comprehension you may think you have, which you may think you got the full knowledge of something. You see what I'm saying here? I hope you do. So look, I just said senses. You know, we use these words, sense. That make no sense, man. A nonsense. You know what I'm saying? And it's like we're quick to dismiss Tig and laugh and, you know, scorn and, you know, you can go on with it. But then sense is also synonymous with awareness, feeling, sensation, consciousness, perception, recognition. He or she felt a sense of, you know, anxiety or a sense of guilt. You see how the word sense and how we could be limiting that comprehension of it to how we will perceive what, or how we would respond to something we may read or something we may hear or information you may gather. And you may have, and you just have a limited perspective of what you think you know so well. You know what I mean? And the thing is, if it doesn't have any relation, if you don't get specific with information, how is this relevant to me? How does this help me know myself more? You know? And to ask the correct questions to be able to access the deeper regions, the deeper dimensions, the inner dimensions of information, to be able to take you into what can become more specific and meaningful for you, relative to you, so you can know yourself truly. So the spiritual awakening. So anyway, I'm saying about, you see, sense, how we look at a word and how we're using it. So something makes nonsense. It's mumbo jumbo. And usually things that our grandparents or grandmother, grandpa, you know, our mother, you know, our mama jamba, as I said, is where you get mumbo jumbo from. Mumbo jumbo, I mean. And you hear that's a European or Western term, mumbo jumbo. That's a load of nonsense. So you're putting down the wisdom that comes from an elder in more wiser, or may have a deeper knowledge. You know, you get some people, that sounds very good. That sounds clever. You know what I mean? It's like, I think, yeah, but you're not trying to be clever. You know, it's like, there is a deeper dimension than what you may be perceiving in what you think don't make sense to you. That's what point I'm making. And sense is not limited to some linear, you know, logical, mental processing. And what's coming up inside of you that's blocking, you know, such and such. Why, you know? These are questions. So look here, you know. Every man does his thing a little way different, you see. You know, many rivers flow, you see, through their own channel, through different territory, different terrains, you know. On the planet, these rivers are flowing. But they're all flowing towards the same one source, the ocean, eventually, you see. So, you know, there's a diversity, basically, I'm saying, of how you can come to, diversity of ways in how you can come to self-knowledge of your, you know, knowledge of yourself. And information isn't, you know, it has to become seen as something more than just gathering information. Just to know a lot of things about you know, just to seem to know a lot of things about a lot of different stuff. But there's no depth to anything. It's just surface. And you don't even know how any of that information relates to you specifically. Let's get specific, you know. And, you know, let me just break this up with the next tune here, because I think it's quite, you know, evident, supportive, this tune here. So, yeah, gonna bust a little tune here by Errol Dunkley, and it goes as, yeah, you'll hear it and know it as it comes. Yes, yes, yes. Every man doing thing a little way different. Yeah. A true thing. That was Errol Dunkley there for you. Yeah. So, as you know, the way I've chose to do the show this evening, flowing in this way, I feel vital information. Yeah. How do you deal with information? How are you, how are you gathering information in this, and how is it relevant to you, knowing yourself, assisting you to know who you are truly, deeply, the true you, rather than the surface comprehension we have of things and even ourselves, And as I said, even the way we use words, unity. Unit. I said, we usually talk about uniting against something, coming together, which is to gather together. You see how the word is? To where you feel you call unity against something. And I've explained that unit is the root of the word unite. United. Unity and union, which means Any individual thing or person that is single and complete, within itself. It's a unit. And can also come together with other units to form a greater mass, a larger complex system, like this body. You see? But we don't usually look at the word in that way, yet we would use it. Unity, identity, freedom, liberation. These are the four very strong words. And we talk about, meaning, information. Do we even, something that's not making sense? And it may not make sense to somebody else. But if it's making sense to you, this is what's the more important thing, because it's enabling you to sense in deeper into yourself. You got a higher senses. You got the tactile senses, 5 senses. And then you got the 6th sense, as they say, is going beyond the physical tactile senses, the 6th sense. You have energy centers called chakras. They say 7, Just go on that. 7 inner. These are inner higher senses. So 7 and 5 makes how much? 12. You got 12 senses. Wow. And we just kind of identifying with sense, either with the 5 tactile ones, the eyes, the ears, the smell, the taste buds, and the touching, tactile, tangibly touching with your hands. That's what we usually focus on. Then you've got another 7, which is dealing with your inner higher senses, which are correlated and corresponds to chakra centers or energy centers within your energy vehicle, your energy template. And to know that obviously there's more to you than this physical body, because there is an energy that is beyond what you can physically see and perceive, that exists, existing through this body. But if you was to try to cut up the body to find it, you wouldn't find it. You wouldn't cut the body and say, here's a thought. See, there's the thought, and here's these emotions. Yeah, man, there it is, This is where the emotion is. That is not, you can't find it like so. Oh, the soul. We hear talk about the soul. Oh, you can't cut up body and go find it, because it's beyond the limited tactile sense faculties that is limited to the physical, the slower, denser, moving matter that we identify with and say is ourselves. But there's obviously something far deeper and more to who we is. Yet we don't perceive that with our physical or the 5 tactile senses. Yet it is perceivable, because sense, as I said, is not limited to some logical mental process. It's actually a faculty. And faculty can be developed, like the faculty of discernment. But senses actually is far much more than how it's even termed and used. That don't make sense, someone would say. And it doesn't matter if it don't make sense to somebody else. What makes sense to you, what you find is specific information that helps you understand yourself more, help you get to the deeper depths of yourself, to go beyond the limited perception you've had, the conditioning and all of that, Then that's what matters. That's what matters. And sometimes people will challenge you to say, well, boy, that doesn't make sense. And, but then what comes up in you? Insecure? Do you feel insecurity? Because and sometimes we can't articulate ourselves the way we want to, we would prefer, because some things that we're tuning into goes beyond the words, the limitation of the words, as words are limited, to be able to describe what we're intuitively, sensing and receiving knowingness through that medium, and cannot actually explain what we intuitively know in words that are comprehensible to another individual. It doesn't mean that what you're experiencing, there's no sense to it. As I said, sense, But then can you feel to yourself, well, just because it doesn't make sense to somebody else, that it has to now not make sense to you? You know, because really it's all comes back to you. That's why it's called, you know, that's why we're talking about self-knowledge. And spiritual awakening, you know. So, anyway, I'm going to further along with what I'm saying. Because I had a question about what is the soul, you know. But not from a perspective of, it was from, because I do evolutionary, what can be seen, intuitive astrology. You know, I see this as one of the tools, as a tool that helps thyself know thyself. And, you know, if you know how to use the tool for the purpose it was created for, and you use that tool correctly, it assists you to know who you are in more of a sophisticated way than anybody else, or the limited perspectives others may have of you, or the understanding limited, or beyond the limited understanding somebody is capable of grasping. That should not deter you, shouldn't stop you, because we're all complexed and simple at the same time. And we are all individual expressions of a greater reality, and we are unique in our individual expressions of that greater, grander reality. So, and look, you know, as I said, these four words I used, I said unity, identity, freedom, and liberty. You know, we use language to inform one another, to convey message or communicate. You see what I'm saying? And communication, as I said, is a form of connectivity, or can be a reason why there's disconnection. We hear the term disunity, which is just another way of saying separated or divided. But as I said, the word unity is usually used as in we need to unite, usually against something else. You see? So where is the motion driving behind the use of, you know, a word or the intention? What's the energy behind it? You know, where we say stuff like, you know, we must unite against such and such, because don't you see, such and such is, you know, don't hold our interest in, you know, high regard, and, you know, them have their agenda for, you know, and if we don't unite together against, you see what I'm, it's like unity isn't against nothing. There's the thing. When you look upon the unity, it means to be complete, whole, and also individual, as an individualized expression of that wholeness. And as I said, the word individual means indivisible duality, inseparable duality. So how is it that what is already whole and complete has become to perceive itself as separate? It's perceiving itself as separate because of this idea that what is jewel is separate. You see? Think duality, and even when you have the word jewel, it's usually between, you know, in the old days, it's between two men with swords or a gun. You know? 10 paces, you know, back to back, and walk 10 paces, and then after when you reach the 10 paces, you turn around and fire. And who the bullet hit first, yeah, that's the one who loses there right now, jewel, you know? Or you can have a sword fight, jewel, you know? Which is, sword is, look at this, sword is symbolic for the mental. Hence when people say, you know, hear the term, let me test your metal. I'm talking about your mind. So you end up having a jewel of the minds. And see how it go? Because minds who are perceiving themselves as separate. So you get this idea of duality. So duality brings this belief in duality brings this idea of separation. But in reality, that which is what you perceive as jewel is actually two extremes of the same thing. You see? You think it's jewel, oh, it's double, it's two, separate things. One versus the other. Look at the perception. You know what I mean? It's like, how are you going to even... And the fact is that when you think, check this out, when you're thinking, you're actually activating vibrations and sending those vibrations, those thoughts, those emotions, energy, motion, feelings into the atmosphere. And these are electromagnetic impulses which are creative in its nature. It manifests things, you see. So how are you manifesting what we using terms that we're not even looking for a deeper, like why, what, and how, to know the more of the deeper authenticness of something rather than just depending upon the superficial surface, mentality you have on something. You see? You know what I mean? You're going to have to know yourself why information and why, so, you have to get into specifics and knowing how it, what is it relevant to you? How is it relevant to you? Because you're going to know some things that may not make sense to others. And others would want to fight you down. Even when they think they're not. They're going to fight you down with, well, that don't make sense to me, and ha ha ha. And then, you get into some mind battle, mental duel. You see what I'm saying? This kind of versus this, versus that, And if your sense of identity or whatever you feel is making sense to you is only coming from you identifying with the superficial idea of who you are, this personal self-image, or you've only got superficial surface level so-called understanding, not even understanding of something, of some information you gathered, then you ain't got you can't stand in your own self. You can't stand in your own truth because you don't know it yet. The roots haven't gone deep enough for the tree to grow any higher. And the roots have to be deep within yourself. You see, the self-knowledge and waking up to who you is, it's all about how you're gathering information and the relevance that this information has to you at the end of the day. A lot of people just go around agreeing with what other people may have to say because they may be more forceful with it. Or, they're seeking their sense of identity based upon how many people agree and see their same point of view. You know what I'm saying? And you're in a group or some organization or somebody has a stronger personality, to yours. And you may feel intimidated by the way they, come with something. And, you have to, how is information nurturing and nourishing you to know yourself? Or how is it keeping you stuck in a superficial level of what you may believe you understand, but you don't? If you get challenged, because you're not going to be everybody's cup of tea. You're not going to be doing everything the same way everybody else does. You know what I'm saying? These are the things that will come to rise when you are looking to express and be that unique individual that you are. You see, a lot of people in the West think it's got nothing to do. Oh, the individual is the thing, is a problem. We need to be dealing with the collective and the group. I've just said to you that unification, union comes from the word unit, which means anything or person that is single and complete within itself. Which also can come together to form a larger group of a complex, more of a complex whole. But it begins with the individual, the wholeness of the single, unified individual. We're looking for unity outside of ourselves, in the sense of how we identifying with even the word union, unity. I must unite with, you have people looking for their other half. This is how they look at what union is in the relationship. I got to find my other half. So you're a half, you're a piece. You're not a whole unit. You're a half of something that you got to unite with as the other half that is separate from you out there somewhere, in order to be unified, in order to feel complete or be complete. Now, don't you see how that's a separative and limited perspective on even the word union? Or when the word unit, the root of it doesn't even mean that. It doesn't, you want to unify. And then the identity. A lot of folk we got a lot of identity crisis. And you got to have to see the diversity of even that. It's not so cut and dry. You got people who got identity crisis, identities to do with what? Superficial, your color, your hair texture, your ethnicity, your check it out. You've got identity, also a crisis dealing with gender. You got identity crisis dealing with the groups, the religious beliefs, you have identity, what you're identifying with. There's identity crisis going on all over the place, man. And we're saying about our identity. So what is identity? Is to identify who you are, to identify something or someone. But look, the ultimate identity is to know yourself. And what you're identifying with determines the nature that identity is of. What I mean by that, you can be identifying with something your identity is what you also seek security from. Your emotional sense of security, your emotional way, the way you relate to yourself, how you feel about yourself. Your emotional sense of security, your emotional identity. You see how that go? So identity is quite, broad. What does it mean? What's the why? The why, the what, the how. There is a need for a thinker. Well, deeper thinking. There's a need for deeper thinking. You see, and to tap into deeper, higher senses beyond just the limited tactile 5 senses. So, how this show has gone this evening, it's there to tickle you. It's to stimulate deeper thought. We don't question even, it's to stimulate and activate within oneself maybe a broader way of looking at something they've been looking at all along, but has never really seen it in the way that they may have the opportunity, if they're receptive, to see it now. Otherwise, you're going to go along with something based on the limitation of of its relevance and specificness to your own self. You're going to go along with something. Go along with, hold on to information that doesn't even, you may not even have any true relevance to you. You see? So, I also feel I want to share something with you because something was brought to my attention. There's many different things I could talk on. I could just talk about unity for a whole 2 hours. I could talk upon the topic of unity or identity or freedom and liberty and what is that? You know what I'm saying? Because, some of the things that are so simple, we discard it. We discard it, and yet we're using it every day, depending on how you're using that to think with. We're using these limited terms to operate with, function. So, I'm here to say, well, look, here's a more expanded view. You don't have to let go of your view, but hey, here's another view, and through your own, what it activates within inside of you, you can then know for yourself whether you will retain the limited view that you had before, prior to this different way of looking at the same thing, maybe, or a more broader view that then now if you see it, you then, you make up your own mind. You will decide, if you see it, why would you want to hold on to the limited point of view now that you had before? You'd embrace the more broader perspective, wouldn't you? In order, then your consciousness is expanding. You are growing. Your spiritual awareness of yourself begins to expand from the inside out within you, and you're knowing things through direct experience rather than having to depend upon, the intellectual mental processing procedure, of what makes sense to you or not makes sense to you. And then even the word sense, as I said, is more than what you think it means. So I think this is important, or, food for thought, y'all. Food for thought. Food for thought. Food for the expansion of consciousness. You see? And, the times we're in, it is, this is a big necessity to have to, for one and all individual to open up to. Now, I was saying something to someone the other day, which led to the question, like, if I can explain about, what is the soul? And how does the soul evolve? Because it's to do with the soul astrology readings I do. And, it's something that you use to even just study your own self, man. So I was referring to Pluto in the chart being the soul. Now, a lot of people got different ways of looking at astrology, and, maybe I may do a show titled, the next show, called The Occult. Because even words like that needs to be like, gosh, because it gets in the way of people's growth. The stagnation in the interpretation of what they believe something means and what they think makes sense, or why something doesn't make sense. And, man, the duality, mental jewels, battles. Yet we talk about unity. You see what I'm saying? And, come on. And don't even know what the word unity actually means. Or we then hold a version of what we think unity must mean and expect that to be what we must conform to. And yet, as I said, man, unity. I mean, it starts with you. You realizing that you're a single, indivisible duality, complete, you're a whole unit within your own self. But the belief in separation is what causes a lot of delusionary beliefs that, that supports this, supports ideas and desires that leads you actually more away from yourself rather than back to you. As I said, that the word you always, every road always ends up turning into a U-turn back to yourself. Any road you're walking on, always going to become a U-turn back to you, yourself. So, the soul. Let me just share something with you, because you see, as you get deeper to get a deeper understanding of yourself, you begin to start to realize you are yourself as a soul, and less as a person, less as a personality, less as you're not just going to you won't just be seeing yourself as the surface and the waves on the water called the sea. You know, you won't be identifying with yourself on that limited basis. You would begin to, when you start to submerge into the ocean of consciousness of yourself, you realize that everything is unified. You know, there's no separation or separative sense of identity that on the surface level you would be tempted to identify with at the surface level of who you think yourself to be or even others to be. You see what I'm saying? But it all starts at home. It starts with you getting to know yourself. And that's why I'm saying information, how you perceive it and how you relate to it, is it specific to you? So what is the soul? And the thing is, you as the soul evolves. Now, let me clarify something here because, again, evolution. You know, by the term we have of it through the science interpretation, we're led to think that everything everything has come out of evolution, in the sense that evolution is a process of random chance and accident. You know what I'm saying? Random chance, mutation, and survival of the fittest. This is how we're taught to perceive the word evolution, to evolve, you know? And it's like, when you talk about that, if you look at it from that perspective, random chance, mutation, and survival of the fittest, you're taking out consciousness and intelligence out the picture. You're making out that there's no rhyme or reason behind anything. There's no higher intelligence that, you know, creation or that which, you know, all that exists has been drawn from. You know, you're saying that there's no intelligent consciousness, awareness behind that which actually, within existence, that actually creation emerges from. You know, you're saying it's just chance mutation. There's no intelligence behind any of what has taken place to be organized into the complex organisms that and diverse expressions of everything we see, including, you know, from a plant to a baby. That's the usual idea of evolution that, from a scientific perspective, we're given to kind of like think with. You know, we evolved, you know, from amoeba into, you know, what you got now, and it was all by chance, and it's all about the survival of the fittest. Well, that's not the evolving I'll be talking about here when I'm going to, you know, referring to, you know, the evolution of the soul. When you look into the word evolve, it actually means to unfold or to roll out. And you can see evolution as a part of a process of growth, okay, and expansion, as we can observe the real aspect of evolution in everything we do within nature. From a plant to a, you know, from a seed to a plant, we see how it's a evolving process of becoming, you know, as you're growing more into the wholeness of yourself. You see? So evolution from the soul perspective is where I'd be kind of talking from here. So I'm going to add something more to the show here, but I'm going to be wrapping it up soon because I just felt to go into this in this way, you know, the discussion today, because just because something doesn't make sense to you per se, doesn't mean it doesn't make sense to somebody else. But you got to be really honest with yourself. You got to be honest, because information changed, and you got to be also receptive to what level of whatever makes sense to you. You have to also be receptive to more, you know, to more of more making sense to you. You see what I'm saying? Of what may not have previously made sense to you before. You see what I'm saying? Because don't limit sense to some logical, linear thinking process. You're dealing with the faculties that are sensory faculties. And these are instruments that actually the soul uses to communicate with its representative. Your ego is the representative of the soul when, if you're knowing yourself, your personal identity is realizing that you are actually the soul, and your soul has created this identity called the ego for itself as a vehicle of expression to fulfill its own evolutionary intention. Sounds like a lot of words and what's not, which it is. But I'll go into it another way. So I'm going to talk about the soul here. Share some notes out on this. And in your chart, everybody's got an astrological chart. Pluto and Pluto's polarity point is what actually represents the soul and your soul, the evolutionary intention of your soul. Yeah? And this is why it's so important to know who you are at a deeper level. So you're not just identifying, you're not identifying with the waves that are separating itself from the ocean and then returns back to the ocean, where you see that waves are impermanent. Waves are temporary. A lot of us, I can use the term the ego, the mind, person, form, the personality as the wave. And who you are as the soul is the ocean. Now, the ocean, when you go under the sea into the ocean, when you submerge beneath the surface, you find that in the ocean, everything is united. But when you're at the surface, there's whole heap of waves, ripples, large waves, large ripples, small ripples. You know what I'm saying? You got movement. You got that which waves separate itself from the ocean, and that separation actually emerges from the ocean and returns back to the ocean. And those waves are temporary, impermanent. But the ocean is permanent. You see what I'm saying? The ocean itself ain't temporary. And as the waves symbolizes separation, yeah, as separate waves, the distinction of separation, you find that the ocean there's no separation in the ocean. Everything is unified in the ocean. When you go beneath the waves, merge into the oneness, where everything is unified. So there's a deeper understanding of ourself where we can experience and realize our true self, our true identity as source, and the wholeness and oneness and completeness of ourself as an individual. As I'm saying, unity comes from unit, and to experience what true unity is first within ourselves, to then be able to manifest what unity really would be. But when we hold on to concepts of unity and not knowing it in relationship with our own self first, how relevant is this? What is the relevance of this information to me? Yeah, that's how you have to look at information. Yeah, you can't just, you got to get more specific with information, you know? So it brings meaning to your life. And you end up having meaning, gives you meaning, a sense of meaning that assists you to know yourself in a true, authentic way. But then if you're identifying with the waves, your sense of identity is going to be what? Is going to be attached to something that's impermanent. And that is going to create turbulence. That sense of identity is going to be carrying within it a whole sense of insecurities based on this attachment to an identity of separation, something that you feel is separate from the whole. And you think you got to find this greater identity outside of yourself, or have it validated by outside of yourself who agrees with you and who, makes sense, who you can make sense with. But it's about you understanding yourself, ultimately. So this bigger story when we're dealing with, or this bigger journey when we're talking about spiritual awakening, I think it's pertinent to inject at this moment. And I will continue this in the next show because I see the time is what it is. And in it being what it is, I'm going to be wrapping up soon. But I just wanted to kind of touch on where I'll be going in next strong, because I'm talking about how I said in astrology, because I do soul astrology. And I suppose being an Aquarius, it's not surprising if anybody who knows about Aquarius and astrology. But in your own chart, Pluto represents your soul, okay? And Pluto's polarity point represents your soul's evolutionary intention. And so I'm gonna just touch on some things here. The soul, you know, what is a soul, and how does it evolve? Because we're talking about we're supposed to be growing into, you know, we're growing, we're having an earthly experience. We're human beings we're spiritual beings having a human experience, and you know, through experiences you are, how can you say, discovering more or remembering more of yourself. You're evolving, unfolding. You see what I'm saying? Unfolding more awareness of who you are as you evolve, as you grow, as you experience more of the life of yourself. So the soul, what is a soul and how does it evolve? So I'll go read something here a little bit for you. Before we discuss the soul and its evolution, we must first understand the phenomenon of evolution, which I touched on a bit. What is evolution in the first place? And how can we objectively validate that we are all evolving? The simplest way to validate the natural law of evolution is based on the universal human experience, in which all of us know that we are in a continuous state of becoming. This is not a function of beliefs or needing to believe it. It is simply a fact. In addition to the universal experience of becoming, we can observe the natural law of evolution in countless ways, as applied to the totality of creation. We can observe it in the context of human life, plant and animal life, and the fundamental changes to the earth itself as an evolving planet. Evolution, simply defined, is the process of one form leading to the next in such a way that the form is completely and unalterably changed. A good analogy of this process is a caterpillar that makes a cocoon and then changes into a butterfly. Evolution can be the change of energy, the changing of a pre-existing structure into a totally new structure, or the change of anything. The word change implies evolution. Another aspect of evolution that we must address is involution. This is a simple principle that describes the death of the old pattern as a structure or any old form that is preventing further growth and causing stagnation. Involution, or the natural law of the death of a pre-existing structure, must precede evolution. The death of the old behavioral patterns or pre-existing form must occur before evolution or change can occur. When evolution becomes necessary, it always implies that stagnation has occurred and no further growth can manifest. In all life forms, there exists a natural law called survival. When this natural law is ignited or stimulated for whatever reason, it will always cause the natural law of involution and evolution to occur, so the survival of the life form or structure can be sustained. There are two main ways that evolution and involution manifests. One form of evolution is cataclysmic, you know, cataclysmic evolution, correlates with intense, sudden, and abrupt changes in which the pre-existing structure is fundamentally altered into a short period of time, or in a short period of time, usually over time, whereas cataclysmic evolution creates stark and immediate changes. These two types of evolution can be objectively validated by any of us and do not require beliefs or philosophies of any nature, you see, in order for you to acknowledge. Now, astrologically, Pluto correlates with the natural laws of evolution and involution. The soul, because Pluto correlates with the soul, we will briefly discuss the soul and the ego that each soul creates before we describe and illustrate the meaning of Pluto in the birth chart. What is a soul? How can we know that we do indeed have a soul or become aware of our soul? We can experience and validate our soul outside the testament of enlightened beings and specific beliefs of any kind. The definition of the soul given to us by all the great avatars and gurus of our time and before, and applied in the Pluto material, is this: the soul is an immutable consciousness or energy which has its own identity that remains intact from lifetime to lifetime. It is naturally a part of the universal consciousness that created it, or it drew its being out of in the first place. The immutable means that this consciousness cannot be destroyed, because energy cannot be destroyed and can only change form. Clearly, when we discuss the soul, we are describing the nature of energy that is no different than the energy of consciousness itself. Astrologically, consciousness correlates with Neptune. The most important question to ask and answer in our discussion of the soul is, how can we all objectively validate and experience our soul independent from belief systems of any kind? In other words, how can we inwardly prove to ourselves that we have a soul, and in this way experience our own soul? Again, the soul is the energy of consciousness. We cannot open up the brain and find the soul. However, we cannot open up the body and find emotions either. But we all know that we have them. We cannot open up the brain and find the soul because it is consciousness. Consciousness, again, is energy, as well as vibration. Consciousness itself exists everywhere on earth in all forms of life. The existence of consciousness has been and still is one of the greatest mysteries posed to science and scientists, because science has not been able to explain the origin of consciousness or even how it came to be. Yet an origin or universal source of consciousness must exist because of the sheer fact that consciousness exists in the first place. And in addition to consciousness existing, must add that we're also talking about not just awareness, we are talking about intelligence. Consciousness, intelligence is a twin reality, you see. This is exactly the starting point for the creation of religion and philosophies. The human need to contemplate and consider within the desire to know where we come from and why. Such contemplation and reflection of this nature becomes the causative factor of beliefs. These beliefs are the result of human pondering upon the origin of life itself. I think we can all agree that there is a fundamental difference between actual knowing and the need to believe in an answer. The point here is to emphasize that there is a way to know the answers to the big cosmic questions versus the need to believe in any given answer. The sheer fact that there is a manifested creation implies that there must also be truths that inherently exist because of the fact that manifested creation exists in the first place. In other words, there must be an origin of creation by the sheer fact of its existence. In generic terms, this origin is called the creator, the source, or the origin of all things. In religious terminology, this is called God or the goddess. It is an observable fact that consciousness exists in all forms of life. That which is the source of consciousness of itself must also be consciousness. Thus, the totality of consciousness emanates from this source. All life forms have the appearance of being separate from another life form, yet are simultaneously connected to one another. Take the example of two plants that are next to one another. These two plants appear separate, yet are simultaneously connected to one another by the sheer fact of being plants. The point of this illustration is to demonstrate that there is an individualized aspect to consciousness, yet there is also a universal aspect to consciousness that binds all the individualized aspects of consciousness together. Another way to illustrate this point is the wave upon the ocean. The ocean is certainly the origin of the wave. However, from the point of view of the wave, if the individualizing aspect of consciousness is centered there, the wave appears and seems separate. In other words, if the center of gravity of your consciousness is centered in the wave, then the wave appears and is experienced as something separate from its own source, which is the ocean. On the other hand, if the gravity within consciousness is in the ocean, then the ocean simultaneously experiences its totality while at the same time experiencing the individualizing aspect of itself as manifested in the waves that emanate from it. In the very same way, then, the universal consciousness, which is the origin of all consciousness, has created and manifested the totality of the manifested creation. This, of course, includes the human being and the consciousness within the human being. Within human consciousness, there exists a natural individualizing aspect. This occurs as a natural result of the human life form as a seed that produces many other branches that is no different than the ocean and the wave. Thus, each human being has its own individualizing consciousness that is called the soul. Remember that the soul is an immutable consciousness that remains intact from lifetime to lifetime and is naturally a part of universal consciousness that created it in the first place. How can we know, independent from belief systems, that a universal creator or source exists? Long ago, before the development of religion, philosophies, and complicated cosmologies, the human being, so-called human being, learned through inner looking, self-reference, or contemplation that a light appeared on the interior of consciousness as breath became very, very shallow and even stopped. The light appeared as a natural result of breath shallowing or stopping. Much later in human history, this became known as the third eye. It is this very light that symbolized and connected the individual consciousness reflected in the soul to the universal consciousness that is the universal source
or the origin of all things. The human being also learned long ago that by merging its own individualized consciousness or soul with that light, its consciousness would expand in such a way that the individual consciousness itself then becomes universal and was then able to consciously experience the ultimate source of all things. The wave returned to the ocean. These fundamental principles are all based on natural laws. Natural laws are truths that are self-evident in nature and will be true for all times, whether the human, so-called human being, inhabits the planet or not.
Now I'm going to kind of pause there because next Tuesday I'm going to go into the evolution of the soul. But right there, what you have heard about, hey,
Soul. And what is a soul?
and how does it evolve? Yeah. I've just recited something there for you. And, you know, it's capsulated a lot of what I was started up saying at the beginning, you see. And about sense, yeah? You can see how everything kind of links in together, eh? Why information, how you gather information, you have to get to the point where you go beyond the superficialness of information to ask yourself, how is this information, any information is relevant to you? You have to get specific. Otherwise, you just got a whole heap of information in your head swirling around, and now the gravity point is all there, but you don't know anything. You don't know anything about you. It's like, so what does it mean to you? You don't even, you know what I'm saying? It's just, hey, let me just regurgitate certain stuff. Wow, that sounds really good. You got a lot of information, man. You seem to know a lot. But having a lot of information doesn't mean you initially know anything. Because you could just, you don't even understand how the information you're carrying connects and interconnects and to some, you know, to a greater picture, you know, to a greater wholeness. You see what I mean? And that will happen if you're not looking at information with the awareness to ask yourself, why, what, and how does this information relate to me? And it's relative. How is it relative to me in a specific way? How does it help me know myself? You see? You know, there's a saying, he who knows all and not know himself knows nothing. You see that? He who knows all and not know himself knows nothing. You see how that go? And even there's a deeper meaning in that statement as well. But it's just to highlight the point I'm making here. Why the gathering of information needs to become also more than just gathering of information to say, I know this. Oh, yeah, I know that. Oh, you heard of this? Yeah, I know that, man. Yeah, you can't tell me nothing about this, man. So-and-so, me know this. Like, yeah, all right, it's cool. But it's more than that. You know, the information, how is it relative to you? Specifics. And you're the most specific, special, specified. You know, you get people specialists in certain fields. Well, you know, this whole thing about self-knowledge is about self-mastery. The master, realizing the master. You know, you can master yourself. And I explain about the soul, you know, is immutable consciousness. It lives lifetime after lifetime, from lifetime to lifetime. It's your unchanging identity. It's the ocean. Your soul is what's created this mind, body, and form and self-image. But it's whether we are
moving in tune with ourselves, aligning with our soul's evolutionary intent to be in harmony with ourselves, or whether we are, we're not in harmony with our soul's desire. Basically, we're caught up in our personal sense of identity based upon this personal self-image and what it desires. And as he explains there, evolution is about change. But before you can have an evolution, you have to have an involution, which is the ending of an old structure, an old limited perception, an old limited way, in order for evolution to be able to unfold the now, expanded, the change, and transmutation into something else, something new. So what is doing that, you see? And what is growing? What is becoming something new? What is always becoming? What is always becoming? That is you. So I'm going to wrap it up this evening now. And call it a night. But the purpose of information, why are you gathering information? Are you just caught up on a cycle of gathering more and more and more and more because your security comes from you believing you need to know more and more and more of information gathering to feel adequate in saying you know something? But if anything, any information you're gathering is not assisting you to know yourself by you realizing or becoming aware of the relevantness of information. It's all relative. Therefore, what relevance does it have to me? You have to get specific in order for information to become useful to you, nourishing for you, nurturing for you. And to know that information is energy. It's more than just letters and words you read in a book or things you have heard while you're in the herd state of mentality, following what you've heard and following the herd. And if something don't make sense to you, you're quick to kick it out and maybe even try to humiliate somebody as being an idiot. And it's really funny because even the word idiot comes from actually originally the word idiom, meaning one who lives by their own idea. They don't just get caught up in consensus thinking. And usually when you get the majority agreeing on something, if they have individuals around them that don't agree with them, they insult you and say, "Oh, you're an idiot." Look at that. Meaning that you're actually holds on to your own idea. You think for yourself. You're a wise, private individual. You see, look at the word idiot. Go into it, man. Is anything I'm saying, it's not like you cannot find it yourself. It does. The root of it goes to the word idiom, and idiom is an idea. So with people who can think for themselves, who don't say, okay, well, I'm going to follow the consensus or whatnot, are usually labeled as, that they're strange or something. But actually, it's a compliment to be called an idiot. You see how different things sounds now. Totally to one's comprehension they thought they had of the meaning of the word idiot. Now, all of a sudden, that may not make sense to you. You know, see how it go? And then sense is not even what you think it means, based upon limited logical linear thinking process in order to, say you comprehend something. And there's different levels of logic. You can have deductive logic and you have inductive logic. There's such logic, yes, different type of logic. So, someone may be thinking, they're dealing with logic. And because something's not making sense to what they consider is logical, they'll say something's nonsensical. But it's like, but what they call it is nonsensical can be coming from a different logic. That's how it go.
So, you know, but the human ego, that self-image, that's what can either be in harmony with your real self's intention or actually fight against it by trying to defend some illusion it has of itself through what it believes in. So it's very important to know the difference and know that it is possible to have direct knowledge, direct knowing of yourself. As I just was saying earlier on about the soul, just a few moments ago, you can know you got a soul. Differently to having to believe if you do or not. But that will be discussion or conveyor message to you next round. So, in saying that, I'm going to be moving on and bid you all a good shadow hour. And yeah, cosmic love, rising up and from the cosmic roots, originating from the cosmic source, to all my soul brothers and sisters tuning in and who have tuned in and will continue to tune in. I bid you good rest, good shadow hour, and cosmic love, y'all.